information, is that the first couple of layers of every organization is going to be stripped. So there's no entry-level positions, okay? So you have this problem of transition, you have this problem of the entry-level positions going away, and you need to figure out how a company economically can hire somebody and develop them to that level without paying them too much money here and getting them to that level where you used to get diversity of experience to get, I've got a lot of practice not knowing what I'm doing, to get to that level of experience. So the answer to that is apprenticeships. And the answer to that is what started actually right over a stone's throw from here a few years ago. We now, over the last year, Tennessee now has more apprenticeships than they have had in over a decade. And the reason, that's only because that's as far as we can see back in the data. So we were able to develop an infrastructure, I like to call it the Kingsport infrastructure, where we have apprentices growing in leaps and bounds even through the pandemic. There was so much pent-up demand and so much knowledge from our employer base that not only I need to solve a problem now, but I'm going to have a real problem 5, 10, 15 years from now because I don't have an infrastructure that can develop my workforce like I used to. And so labor participation, really good, an infrastructure to help transition, not just from where we are now, but also transition when we move into jobs for the future is what that's typically called. Jobs for the future is what it's called. So apprenticeship, more than we've ever had in a decade. So do I get another amen from somebody? Thank you, man. Now I might have to get my piece of paper, so I know the third one. The third one is something that Tennessee did very quickly that more than half the states didn't do. So there's this thing called the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. It's a savings account for unemployment. So employers pay into that fund and they're taxed for that fund. So they pay into the tax and it goes into this savings account so that if somebody loses their job, then they can get unemployment insurance. Typically, an employee doesn't pay for that, but they earn eligibility through a couple of quarters of work. They've earned the eligibility so they can collect insurance just like you would have eligibility for any insurance. We started the pandemic at the highest level that we've ever had with the trust fund, which means you get to have the lowest tax rates on employers that you can possibly have. We now, at the end of the first year, have the highest level of unemployment insurance trust fund that you can have, and the lowest tax rate that an employer can have. And it looks like the projection is for 3 years out. Some decisions were made quickly, and resources were used that we could use to do that weren't in other states. So I'll pick on Georgia, for example. Georgia doesn't have a trust fund anymore. They all went, and they borrowed money from the federal government as well. And so there's only one way to get that trust fund back up, and it's to tax employers at a time when you want them to hire. And so we have an ability now, we can say in Tennessee it's going to cost you a lot less to hire somebody than it is in Georgia. And so that effort, again, the dual focus, benefits distribution, and what are we going to do when we get through this? We can't get through this and then have another 10 years of hard time, which is what's going to happen to 26 or 27 of the states around the country. They're going to spend a decade building back up their trust fund, and we're ready to go. So that's a very positive, and amongst the calamity opportunity that we had now to come out of this thing competitively better than we went into it. And I have one more, but I'm gonna have to look and see what it is.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. My mother-in-law used to not like me this much. I grew on her after 33 years. She's laughing because she knows it's true. Okay, and so the last one, and when we were talking about this, this is so dry and nerdy, but it's going to be fundamental change to what's going to happen in Tennessee. So we have this thing in Tennessee called Tennessee Reconnect, and we have this 1 million people who've been on unemployment insurance that could probably use some skills to transition to better jobs. There was no way to know who those people were from Tennessee Higher Education Commission. We set up data flows so that people in unemployment insurance can connect to Tennessee Reconnect, have opportunities to move, and market that in a way that we've never done before. So the first time we ran it, to say, well, how many people might be eligible for Tennessee Reconnect that don't know about Tennessee Reconnect, and the number was 500,000. So the first time we ran that data, and that's not surprising because you think the people who lose their jobs first are probably on the lower end without the skills that they need to move that way. So the first time, 500,000, the data we could share with THEC, and THEC's marketing to those folks and moving their, allowing them to have opportunities. And we had the ability to say, if you are doing that, that counts as work training, so you can continue to get unemployment insurance while you're doing that, if you're on the Reconnect program. Data flow, that's kind of under the cover, but I get excited about data flows. Don't tell anybody that, I do. The other thing is we have more people in Tennessee without a high school diploma than we do in high school. That's really unacceptable, and it can be corrected if we as departments talk together. So we have responsibility for adult education, labor and workforce development does. We have the biggest high school in the state. So why don't we market like we do, like colleges go in and provide opportunities for high schools? Why don't we why don't we just treat this like a big high school? And so we went and looked, what is THEC, what do these post-secondary institutions and organizations do for high schools? And we began doing it for adult education, and again, that same data flow that would go from K-12 goes from labor and workforce to the higher ed commission as well. And the last thing is those data flows going to the local areas. Now it's confusing, I know, because until I got to Nashville, I really didn't understand how this worked. But county mayors are the ones who are in charge of the local workforce development authority agency in the region. So Richard Venable is for the district. He's the mayor, I think it's the mayor of record or whatever, but the other mayors are in charge of that. So millions of dollars from the feds come through us to the region. And Kathy Pierce, for example, is not a state employee. She's an employee of that nonprofit that runs the labor and workforce development. Those groups who were trying to employ people were not getting our unemployment insurance data, so they could help the people that had it. They are now. And so those three things, those data flows are going to help, not just now, but a long time from now. And it's really hard to undo as well. And so those are going to start and continue to provide Tennessee with a more unified approach to workforce development as we go through. Things are getting better. Those are the four things. I'm going to pause for some questions here in a minute, but things are, our economic recovery is tied as you can tie it to the healthcare crisis. We're starting to see some really good numbers. We're starting to see some really good numbers that we're beginning to think aren't just happenstance. There's some fundamental things that are changing so we can get this virus back under control or in control and learn to live with it like we've all other viruses. And so the days ahead are bright. I know for everybody it's been a tough year, and there's some things that we're going to be recovering from this, like third grade reading level, for quite some time. But there's also some things that we're going to come out better actually than we did when we went in. It's a necessity and invention. It's innovation, and then opportunity, calamity. It's those things that can happen in a disruption. That if you look for it, then there's some positive things again that can happen on the other side. Okay, with that, I would love to take any questions that folks have. And I will say too, I'm going to announce this. I was trying to talk to the governor. If the governor has time, he's going to show up here. If he doesn't, then I've disappointed you. But if he does, he'll be. And if he shows up, I'll probably quit talking. Yes, sir.
Jeff, I'm a small business owner.
Yes, sir.
I've got 7 vacancies, and I haven't had for almost a year.
Oh.
And every small business owner I talk to has the same issue. Everybody says nobody can find a job. There's plenty of jobs out there to be had. Now, I would consider our work, it's a $10 an hour job, so I consider it to be entry level. We train them what we need. We get applications. We get applicants. And nobody will show up for an interview. Only thing I can test that to is they're being paid to sit at home. And now it's been announced that our all-seeing president has said if you're afraid of getting COVID, you can quit your job and get unemployment. We'll pay you to stay home just because you have a fear of leaving the house. Now, what can be done at the state level to help small business owners such as myself to get incentive for these people to go back to work when there's jobs available?
So that began to happen before this new round of funding that we got. Yours is not a unique story, unfortunately. There's 250,000 jobs on the Jobs for Tennessee website, 250,000 that are there for those who are motivated to get the jobs. And so there's ways reporting that if they don't come to the interview, they can lose their benefits at the end of the day. And there's a way to report that. People are not wanting to tattle and all of that kind of stuff, but we have a problem there. To the second one, see what you do is when you don't know the answer, you say we have a problem there, and you go to the second question. Just been in Nashville 2 years, I got it. The second one, we're waiting on guidance from the feds. There is a law on the books that was passed by Congress that said no, there's reasons you can to COVID, and now we have this executive order, but we don't have a fully formed U.S. Department of Labor with a head yet, and so that is there, but we haven't gotten any guidance. I think the thing to say is these programs are not state programs. These programs are federal programs that the state has to run and implement, and so they're not our rules. So stay tuned. We are watching that to see how that comes about, but I don't have any more information on that particular one for you.